Today we're interviewing Elizabeth Arnella Toynes from Studio Zoe of Austin, Texas. Tell us a little bit about your company and the role that you play.
So I am a co-owner of Studio Zoe. We are local to Austin, Texas. We're a design-first studio. So pretty much everyone on our team they're all designers, classically trained designers, and yeah, somehow we found ourselves into the niche of designing signs.
Nice. I know your backstory a little bit, obviously. So tell us how you get into the sign business.
So I was lucky enough to be in this industry almost my entire life, thanks to a guy named Joe Arnella, who is my father. And one day I convinced him to retire and started a sign business instead, which was a really bad idea in hindsight. But here we are. I own a sign business with my husband now, and my father is no longer in that company.
So your approach to the sign business is a little different than a traditional sign company. Tell us a little bit about the products and services that you provide for your clients.
So for us, all we do in-house is design. So we have separated out. We noticed, along the way that most sign companies don't find design to be something they can charge for, which blows my mind. Time is all you have in a lot of ways. And for us, we charge for that time. So we separate out our design process from our sign process. And then that way we're able to dedicate hours to the design process instead of just trying to rush through that process. And we can really focus on it and become a good partner to our client and make sure that what they have in the end is something that not only fits well in the space and also aligns with any required code, but we really take into account their brand and brand standards and focus on that and make sure that all of our signage that we're putting into a space aligns with the brand standards of that company. We also partner mainly with architects and interior designers and then end users. So we kind of are really trying to take the sign industry out of the commodity of construction and put it back into the hands of the people who are designing the look and feel of this space, which to us is where it belongs.
So that approach is a little scary for the traditional sign shop, right? Like you start off by making, I make it a little sticker, I make a little banner, and then I make an electric sign or whatever, and they grow that way. So with you folks, what were some of the challenges for starting a business that's focused more on design?
Well, the challenge of starting a business and trying to do it different than how most people in the industry do it is that you get told no. But eventually, as we like to say, persistence overcomes resistance. And you get told yes, and you start kind of changing tides. And we made it a point to really stick by our beliefs that design is a marketable and chargeable skill. The people at our company have gone to school for this. They pay student loans to know how to do this. They are experts, SMEs, if you will, for design. And at our company, they're also experts in designing signage. So we really pushed that design is worth charging for. You deserve to charge for your time. And it's not just a part of sales. It's not, pretty much what you're doing is you're handing someone an asset at the end of your design process. And if a company takes that asset and then goes and bids it out and the lowest bidder wins, well, then you've wasted all that time that you haven't charged for, which to me that is insane. Economically very unwise.
Yeah, for sure.
You can't run a business like that long term and not start to lose your footing in the industry.
Right.
Especially nowadays, signs are becoming more and more artistic. They're becoming more and more a statement piece, which I know they got away from for a long time as construction took over the industry. But we're kind of circling back to that. And if you're going to spend all that time designing these huge statement pieces for businesses, then charge for it. Make it a separate contract, and then bid out your sign. And at the end of it, what we do, our first contract, we have a biddable design that our partners can take to whomever they want to get bids on it. And if that company calls us and said, hey, can we bid on this? We say, absolutely, it's theirs, they own it, they paid for it. But on the flip side, for a long time, people would come to us and say, hey, can you bid on this sign? And we'd either call the company who designed the sign and ask, hey, did they pay for this design? And if that company said no, we'd call the partner back and say, you don't own this. We're not bidding on it. You didn't pay for this design. So the company who owns that design should be the company that builds that sign. So that's a hard thing to do. Just say no.
Especially when you're starting out, right?
Right. Yeah. And we've come across many instances where we've had to say no. And I think as a business owner in a construction industry, really, saying no is like the just completely opposite of what you would think you should do, and terrifying.
Well,
but we did.
Not that you want to give away all your trade secrets here, but since you do approach sales where most traditional sign shops are going to rely on inbound sales, right? Someone needs a sign over their door. They're opening up a new business. They go to Google, sign shops near me. They look at that one only has 2 stars. That one has 5 stars, whatever. And so they take a lot of inbound inquiries. And so oftentimes they're in a bidding situation where you guys don't participate in that chaos. How do you go out and find new projects? I mean, I'm sure at this point you get a lot of organic stuff going on, but especially in the beginning, like how did you go out and introduce your company and services to people? What are some of the things you did?
I'm going to kind of work backwards from that question. So now we are very lucky. Word of mouth has gone a long way. We put out very strong morals in the beginning. We have a very noticeable and knowable statement that our partners always talk about. And that because of that, we've built a following also through social media. But most of it is just organic now. It's a lot of word of mouth. In the beginning, and how we got there was just like a lot of people do. I mean, we did what we call a good old dog and pony show. We'd go and we'd talk to architectural firms instead of construction companies. So we decided, instead of going the good old boy route, which is very much a thing here in Texas, we were going to kind of buck the system and say, hey, let's go to these architectural firms, which is who we want to partner with. Because you can get one architectural firm and that architectural firm is going to sell for you. As soon as you get in with them, then all of the projects they're working on, they're going to bring you in as the expert in signage. And that's kind of how we got started. We did the same thing with interior design firms. And then the other thing is a lot of architectural and interior design firms have pretty high turnover, at least in Austin. So what we noticed was happening was when we'd pitch to an architectural or interior design firm and those designers or architects would leave that firm and go on to the next, well, they brought us with them. They were now bringing an asset to their new firm. Right. So
people love their tool chest, right?
Right. So we just became a tool in their tool chest, and they brought us in that way. So that worked really well for us.
That's great. So speaking of good old boy network, what is it like being a woman in the sign industry, a woman-owned business in the sign industry, and how do you navigate some of those challenges?
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. I'm not going to lie to you. It's getting a little easier as I think the industry is becoming a bit more progressive now, which is nice. But I do, like I said, we are local to Austin, Texas. And as much as everyone thinks keep Austin weird, let me tell you, we are still emphasis on Texas. So there are a lot of men dominating the construction industry, and they do, whether they mean to or not, demean and look down on you or think you're weaker because you're a woman. So you do definitely have to learn how to command a room, command attention, be confident, and not just confident that you know everything. I mean, there's, the old adage, fake it till you make it, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that approach, but also be confident in your ability to ask questions and not feel like you're asking stupid questions. I know people say there's no such thing as a stupid question, and that is completely untrue. There are stupid questions out there, but just be confident that what you're asking it because you need an answer. And then remember that answer and you use that knowledge going forward on your next project. So I think the best way, at least for me as a woman in this industry, is not allowing people to push you around, holding true to the things that you say, learning to say no.
No means no.
No means no. Learning to say no even in email, because people like to try to take advantage of maybe what they think you don't know. And really just being confident that you're supposed to be there.
Yeah.
That was the biggest hurdle for me, is imposter syndrome, right? And as a woman, I think in the construction industry, imposter syndrome kind of gets even worse because you're just in a room full of men. But just the confidence that you not only deserve to be in that room, but you deserve a seat at the table, and you deserve to ask the questions you need to ask. And like, for instance, there was a time I was working on a project. It was a big construction project. It was one of the last, this was before we changed our model. It was one of the last projects that we had bid. And there were a couple things going on. One was the architect did not correctly draw a typical. So they had a detail that was a hand-painted sign, and it was supposed to be typical for all the floors, but they did not have it as a typical drawing. So we only saw one location for that sign, and there were supposed to be, I think, 9. And they pushed back on me and said, well, you should have known that that was a mistake in the drawing. And I said, you just have to hold your ground and say, no, that's not my mistake. So here's what we can do. And the options are, you're going to have a change order for the remaining signs, or you're going to have one sign. Tell me how you'd like me to proceed. And being able to say that in a room full of construction people who then turn around and say something to the effect of, I can tell that you're new here. Of course, my answers got a lot shorter after that, but it was something along the lines of, nope, definitely not new, but I appreciate you. And then the other problem was that I needed to do a survey. We were doing a pretty intricate neon sign inside a building. This building had steel studs in weird places. So obviously they wanted exposed neon. So we needed to do an additional survey with a neon provider to make sure, the installer, to make sure that they had access to everything they needed access to. And the super was very annoyed that we had to do an additional survey, and pretty much was not as professional as maybe I would like in a situation. But as we walked into the building, said, I don't understand why we need to do another survey for this. And I said, well, unless you want to install this sign yourself, I need our installers to look to make sure we have access. But if you don't want to do a survey, I understand. I can just provide you the sign and you can get it installed. And of course, then he gave us a survey, and then he went on to say, in this $3 billion building that we're building, they're going to look at this $10,000 sign, and that's all they're going to see when they walk in.
Yeah.
And he was mad about it. And I just took that as fuel and said, well, then don't you think you want it to be perfect?
Yeah, exactly. And, the thing about imposter syndrome too, I can relate to that, because even, after years of owning my own sign shop and, 60,000 square foot plants and 60 employees and millions of dollars in work, it's funny because so many times I was in meetings and I'm just the sign guy. But the bottom line is, it's a very complex processes, and you should be confident. If you're running a successful sign shop, you're doing probably a lot more than a lot of the folks sitting in the room managing a successful business. So, okay. So going to your website, obviously you do a lot of design, intense, really cool projects. So just to kind of look at your signs, what is one of your favorite, jobs that you've done over the years?
Oh my gosh.
You have a lot of cool ones, so it'd be hard to choose. They all look pretty awesome, but
it's actually a very, very hard question. I think for moral, just completeness. Doing the Boys and Girls Club was such an awesome treat.
Yeah.
Doing their contribution wall and kind of creating these see-through, very 2-inch deep dimensional acrylic awards that are actually in a lattice wall that kind of create this stained glass effect. That's one of my favorite pieces. I think just because it's in a space that is constantly changing, and it's just the sun kind of makes it constantly change with that space, it's just a beautiful effect. I really like that one. And that project overall, I mean, working with the Boys and Girls Club is just kind of, it's rewarding in a different way.
Right.
I think my favorite, like, oh, that's cool sign is a 23-foot tall toothbrush that we did on Burnett Road for a place called Lydian Dental. It is no longer Lydian Dental, unfortunately, but the 23-foot toothbrush still does stand. It has been painted, which is horribly depressing because one of the coolest features of that sign is, having to think of it from a 3-foot perspective, because it's probably like 3 to 5 feet away from the front door of the business. Mm-hmm. This is definitely a sign that is archived in, like it doesn't work with current code, but because the pole was standing, we'd figure out a way to utilize that pole mm-hmm. and not create too much additional square footage, which would create the requirement for additional permits, which we would not have gotten. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we sleeved the pole with this giant toothbrush, and we knew that people were going to be walking out the door. And when you walk out the door and see just this, the stem of the toothbrush, it's actually a tone-on-tone paint job or spot varnish paint job that has all their icons of these like smiles on a stick and their logo and everything just right there, that really when you're across the street or on the sidewalk, you don't see. So we thought of it from a 3 to 5 feet perspective. We thought of it from a 10-foot perspective. And then, of course, we thought of it from the 23-foot perspective. And you get a different experience with that sign at each of those locations. Like I said, 3 to 5, you get the really, tone-on-tone spot varnish paint job. The 10-foot, you have an illuminated logo going up the side of the toothbrush. And then from the 23-foot, you have the illuminated logo and the bristles illuminate, which is really fun. And each bristle, I think, was 2 feet long. Just acrylic rods that were about that big around.
Yeah, it looks great. I saw the website stuff.
They're pretty cool.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for spending time with us today. So I guess in parting, what would you say is, maybe some of the challenges that you have in the course of a day, and how you might say someone's starting, you always learn best from other people's mistakes, right? Like, so someone's starting a new sign shop, what would be some of the things that you would recommend that they either embrace or avoid, or both?
I feel like the first thing I should say is, number one, charge for your time, mm-hmm. design included. That is very important. Mm-hmm. Number two, if you don't know how to design, we do, and we'd love to white label. So hit us up.
StudioZoe.com, right?
Yeah. But number three, and I think the most important, is figure out what you stand for. For us, mm-hmm. Russell, my co-owner and husband, and I sat down and we decided our motto is do good work for good people with good people. Mm-hmm. And that we take extremely to heart. If we can't live up to that, then why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And for us, that means knowing who good partners are coming in, mm-hmm. knowing to say no to someone when they aren't a good partner, which is terrifying, but worth it. Mm-hmm. But also working with a team, for us, our team members, and treating them well. Mm-hmm. And knowing that we are doing this good work for them as mm-hmm. well. Mm-hmm. And we couldn't do it without them.
Exactly.
I mean, we could. Don't want their heads to get too big. We could. It would be horrible.
Yeah, exactly.
We would hate it. No, we love them. And we took a long time to get a team tailored to our exact needs, mostly cultural needs, inside our company. I think work culture, especially as a remote studio now is very important. You have to be able to create a group of people that can come together and feel the ability to be creative, to be able to make these really big projects come to life. I think that our biggest takeaway from all of this is if we can't do this the right way, then we don't need to do it at all.
Right.
We both, have degrees and could easily be employed in the tech industry here in Austin with no issue, and probably work a heck of a lot less. But for us, then we wouldn't be doing it the right way. We'd be having to work under someone else's moral compass. And for us, we let our moral compass lead our business. Like I said, do good work with good people for good people, not just in business, but in life. And it's how we live.
That's awesome.
All
right. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for spending time with us today at Behind the Signs, and good luck with everything you're working on. I'm personally very proud of you, as you know. Anyway.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much for joining us today on Behind the Signs. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode, where we will learn more about the creative and talented people that make the sign and graphics industry great. If you are interested in being featured on Behind the Signs, we would love to connect with you and hear about the unique ways you are working in the sign industry. Please reach out to us on our Facebook group Behind the Signs and send us a direct message.